Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.
Welcome to a Coffee with Karen, cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo-woo. So each week, we discuss a variety of subjects, normally all around the areas of holistic health. And each of my guests will give, I suppose, their perception really in a way from either a mental, a physical, or a spiritual perspective. And more often than not, it's normally a combination of all three. So your host, I'm Karen Roberts. I suppose my whole coaching practice does incorporate all three. And today's guest, we have Mark Wingfield with us today. And I'm going to let him introduce himself. But this is something that I'm actually really interested because I've never heard of this. So Mark, if you could share with the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, and share a little bit of your story.
Of course, yeah. Thank you very much, Karen. And hello, anybody who's watching, listening. So my name's Mark Wingfield, and I'm really interested to come along today because I got involved in something called havening, which you'll see kind of on that link below, 7 years ago now. And it blew my mind because I'm not a woo-woo guy, and havening isn't actually woo-woo, but a lot of people think it is. And I came to it from a very strange background, really. Because I've ended up doing trauma therapy, a lot of coaching off the back of havening as well. And I came to it from a slightly strange angle. If you'll indulge me for a moment, this will hopefully explain why. So I've got a background, I've been in business, in sales and marketing for so many years, and set up my own business in 2006. I thought I'd do team building through self-defense, because that's kind of a bit of a passion of mine. And that's been a running theme all the way through. And then I developed this approach, which is all about intimidating people. It might sound a bit strange, but to basically get them to learn how to be resilient and be able to stand up for themselves. And if necessary, and only if necessary, to physically defend themselves. So we've been evolving this over the years. And it's a bit strange. I'll take my glasses off and I'll put something else on. The way we do it is I will approach, let's say you're on the course, Karen, I will approach you. And I'll be really horrible. I'm going to do this, by the way, beforehand. You signed a little piece of paper to say it's okay to F and blind and be really quite obnoxious. And we use anything about your appearance, how you sound, anything about your background, your job role, anything that we think is going to fire your hot buttons. And you have to keep your cool and be able to be very assertive and just say, just back away, just leave me alone, I'm not interested. That type of approach. Whereas some people will go, they'll react to it very badly. Some people go, and they'll freeze. And other people will just submit, and that's not good either. So we approach them in kind of this way. What you looking at?
Oh.
Hey? And so when we put the glasses on, we're not very nice. And whilst this is all happening, Karen, you would have somebody standing by your side coaching you through it. So it's experiential, interactive coaching as it happens, so that we modify behavior immediately. So it's quite a scary process, but it's really, really effective because it programs the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain. So if you ever got into something similar, or certain words were used against you that you find are real triggers for you, then you would be able to control the situation far better and get away safely, which is the ultimate objective. Now, that's part of the background. It's essential to tell you that because that's how I got into this weird havening stuff. Because I found that on this scary course, and people know it's scary, I tell them in advance, I'm not going to be very nice later. I'm going to be somebody completely different when I've got the glasses on. And so will my colleague, because there's always two of us. And but when we get to it, and you get a lineup of people down the side of the room, there might be 15 people, and they'll, oh, God, what's he going to say to me? What's she going to say to me? Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh. And often, and we work with young people quite a lot, often you'll have the roughest, toughest looking guys, and they'll be going, that's all right, mate. I don't need to do it. No, do him. No, he needs it. Yeah, I'll watch. Yeah. And of course, these are the guys that need it the most, but they're too afraid to say that they're frightened and they're worried about how they might show themselves up in front of their mates. So a couple of people would duck out sometimes, and I think, oh, wish I could help them. So anyway, somebody said to me one day, why don't you do havening? That'd be really good for your one-to-one stuff. And I'm like, havening? What the hell's that? I've been to Havering in Essex. What's havening? So they said, no, you don't understand. Go and have a chat with Tony. So I had a chat with Tony, who was a mutual friend. And he said, look, be as skeptical as you like. I'll tell you in broad terms what it is. Basically, you think about something that really distresses you, and then you distract yourself. You stroke your arms or your face or your hands, and you lose, or you can lose, stuff that's been there as a traumatic encoding of the amygdala that stops doing certain things, which might have been decades ago. And it can happen like that. He said, I didn't believe it. I thought it was a load of rubbish. But I was sufficiently interested to buy the book that this chap had written, and I'll show you the book, which is When the Past is Always Present by Dr. Ron Rudin. And that was published in 2011. And Tony wanted to go on a course, and there wasn't a course until 2013. This is why you probably haven't heard of it, because it's still pretty new. And Ron, who wrote that book, he's got a big GP practice in New York, and he's also got a PhD in organic chemistry, and he's worked on a number of different neuroscience papers. So he's done a lot of research in neuroscience. And Paul McKenna, you might have come across in your travels.
Mm-hmm.
Paul McKenna is a very good friend of Ron Rudin's. And they were walking in Central Park one day, and basically Paul talked about EFT. I'm sure you come across EFT.
I was going to say it sounds a similar.
Well, I'll come on to that, because there are some links. But anyway, Paul McKenna's walking around Central Park saying, Ron, have you heard about this tapping? And so Ron was, what's that then? And he said, right, you tap here and it gets rid of phobias. And Ron's like, yeah, right. Tell me another one. He said, no. And so anyway, this is using TFT as well. And basically, Paul McKenna showed Ron how to do this. And Ron thought, well, okay, I don't really believe it, but I'll go back to my practice and see if it works on anybody. So he went back to his practice and he had a chat with his fellow GPs. And there was a lady, fellow GP, and he'd said to everybody, anybody got a phobia? And this lady went, yeah, I've got a bit of a problem with cats. And he said, oh, do you mind if I just try something out? So I did this tapping with her, got her to tap, and the phobia went. He was like, that's a bit weird. So the next week, anybody who came through the surgery was like, by the way, I know you've not come to see me about this, but you don't have a phobia by any chance, do you? So he sort of had loads of people to experiment on. And he got rid of a load of phobias that week. And he's like, oh, there's something to this, but I don't believe it's to do with meridian lines and so on, which is what the explanation was apparently about. So being a neuroscientist through and through, he wanted to find out where this came from. So anyway, it took a long time. This is back in the 90s, and he did a lot of research, and I won't bore with all the history. But essentially, the book came out in 2011, which is his theories, which he'd been perfecting with his twin brother, Stephen, who's a dentist. And they'd had lots of people to try. You can imagine that trauma in dentistry. kind of a few people who don't like going to the dentist for reasons usually in their childhood. So anyway, this whole thing evolved, and I went on a course in 2014, and I'd heard about it, and Tony told me that it was a bit unbelievable, but you need to try it out because it works. And I thought, okay, I'll go along. So I went along, and my first training, I'm introduced to this lady called Patty, and Tony's going to demonstrate on her in front of everybody. And he said, Patty will tell you her story, and she proceeded to say, well, 30, I think something like that, 30 years before, her mum had to go in for a serious hysterectomy operation. And Patty was a nurse at the time, and she basically said to her mum, look, Mum, stop worrying about things. You're going to be fine. I've got to go to work now. And she was off to work in the hospital. She said, I'll come around and see you when you come around throwing the anaesthetic. And, you worry about nothing. It'll be fine. No, unfortunately, her mum died. So it's very sad. And Patty lived with that sort of last words that she said to her mum, the guilt associated with that. And every time she thought about her mum, she would start to well up and start crying. So anyway, I saw this demonstration to help Patty. And it took, I'm not really sure, it's going back a few years now, but maybe 20, 30 minutes, something like that. And we were watching and just listening in on what was going on. And Tony, at the end, he said, I'm just going to check in with you, Patty, how you doing? And she turned to the audience and she was crying. I thought, it hasn't worked. Never mind. And she said, no, because she could see the look on people's faces. So, it's not worked. She said, no, these are tears of joy. Because I can't believe I'm thinking about my mum and bizarrely not crying, but I'm crying because it's so happy. Anyway, kind of confusing. But I thought, wow. And this was obviously genuine. She was smiling across her face. She'd been very nervous. It's in front of 15 people that she did the demonstration, which is, it's a bit nerve-wracking anyway. And she didn't really know what to expect. So that's what happened in front of us. And I spoke to her later and I said, how are you feeling now? She said, it's just weird. It's just I don't feel the emotion when I think about it. And now I understand why, because I trained on it. I trained on the science. So it is definite neuroscience. And how to apply it. And there are a number of different havening techniques. It was designed for trauma therapy, but actually it's brilliant for resilience building and coaching. So it can clear all sorts of obstacles out of the way. It's anything to do with emotion. So it's absolutely fantastic. I've been doing it, as I say, for 7 years now. And I've just certified as a trainer. Now, there aren't that many trainers in the world. So I'm going out now training practitioners. And so I've got my first training course coming up, Bonfire Weekend. So we're all ready to roll. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And I've worked doing so many different things now. If you think of anything, Karen, to do with emotion, it will work. Now, I can't guarantee how much it'll work by straight away. And you learn through havening, learning how to be a practitioner, you learn how to be a really good detective and start to peel away the layers of an onion, to get to perhaps the core of why somebody's how they are in a particular state of mind. And if it's something to do with emotion, I can help. But it extends further than that, because there are all sorts of things like fibromyalgia, for example. I've worked on a number of ladies who've got fibromyalgia, and we've got to the root cause of some kind of traumatic incident before, and the pain has just gone. It's not woo-woo, it's just that the pain is a signal from the brain locked up with the trauma. So, I'm not saying it's not designed to be pain relief. It really isn't. But I've heard also, through Steve and his dental side, Steve Rudin, that people have had dental pain stopped just from applying havening. It comes back because there's a reason, but it can be a temporary pain relief. So
it makes sense, because pain or anything like that is not necessarily down to one cause. So for one person that might not work because there is no emotional tie to it, and then for somebody else, just goes to show you are combining everything. I can understand why people would think it's woo-woo.
Yeah.
But I understand the science behind it. You're actually combining the mental and the physical, aren't you?
Yeah, and we go through the science when we train people. We actually take them through the havening. Was also known, it's not so much referred to now, but it's also known as amygdala depotentiation therapy.
Well, that's a little bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Can you
Indeed.
repeat that?
I'd call it ADT when people want to know what that is. But it is, we call it depotentiation of things that are called AMPA receptors on the lateral amygdala of the lateral amygdala. And I won't bore you with all the details of how it happens, but essentially, if you imagine it's like when a traumatic experience happens, as it's happening, sort of foot soldiers stand up and get ready to protect you against whatever it is that you're frightened of. And they stay there, ready to be brought back into action in the future if something similar, something of the same context, same environment, same words, even trigger events, could be the surroundings that you're in. And that's how phobias work as well. So phobias are a form of traumatization. So somebody's got a fear of heights, for example, and they get near a bridge, they might think, oh, there's a drop over there. So it's all associated with perhaps the encoding moment. And we learn as practitioners how trauma is encoded, and then it'd be too crude to say how it's decoded, but how you depotentiate and lose that coding that isn't helpful anymore. So it's fascinating stuff, and applications, well, anything to do with emotion. I've worked with company directors who have been ambushed, as they've called it, in a board meeting, had to resign, gone back to that event, and there's something called event havening. So you go back to the activating event, and that one we cleared in about 40 minutes, something like that. I had a lady I worked with probably about 2.5 years ago now, who unfortunately was a victim of a sexual assault, a nasty sexual assault, 38 years previously. And she'd come on a self-defense course I was running. And looking back on it, I wish I'd not asked the question, but I said to her, oh, Katie, what made you come along tonight? And she burst out crying. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. And she started to basically tell me in graphic detail what had happened to her 38 years ago. It was still at the back of her mind all the time. And she didn't like going out at night, and was very fearful of going out on her own in lots of different places. And I said, well, I can't do it this evening, but if you'll allow me to, next week when we have a better time at the end of the course, I'll explain something that I think can help you. And so she did that. And this is no word of a lie. Within 15 minutes, she'd lost the emotional distress. And she's a Hungarian lady. I'll try and do the accent. But she was basically going, all right, I won't then. But she was my Hungarian's not very good. But she was looking at the floor, trying to work out where her emotion had gone. And she was saying, I would have done the accent now. I won't do it now, but she was saying incredible, incredible, incredible. And she was just looking around. And this is quite common. When people lose something that's just part of them, they're sort of looking around, where's it gone? What have you done with it? What have you done to me? And so because it's an electrochemical change in the body, in the brain, so it's a permanent process because you've made that shift, it doesn't come back unless you're unlucky enough to be re-traumatized in exactly the same way as you were before, which is highly unlikely. So it's permanent. How is
that done? You're going straight into the subconscious. How are you doing it on a conscious level?
Well, it's working on the amygdala. What you do is the brain's not very good at working at lots of different things at the same time, in your conscious brain anyway. So we get you to think about.
I like to multitask, and it doesn't end well.
It does no. Whether you're female or male, it doesn't work brilliantly. No, we're not very good at doing that. So we get people to think about the situation that distresses them. Sometimes they know why, sometimes they don't. And we just get them to feel the emotion. Now, that's the uncomfortable bit. It lasts for about half a minute, but it's necessary it's part of the biological change that we need to have. So you basically trigger the activation, if you like. Mm-hmm. So they're thinking about it, and that's distressing. And then we distract people. So I might say to you, what do you have for breakfast this morning, Karen? And you're thinking, have a fried breakfast this morning? Was it Cocoa Pops? What did I have this morning? And so suddenly you think about something else. And then we start applying what's called havening touch. And this is where some of the links to other therapies or approaches might come in. So havening touch is very simple. It's either gentle stroking of the palms, or it's just stroking from the shoulder down to the arm, or it's the face, or you can use the forehead as well. For people who are follically challenged like me, which clearly you're not, then you can do this like that and not upset your hairstyle. So right. I do this a lot in the morning in the shower, and it just feels nice. If you think back to what we do naturally, if you were a little girl and you fell over, and somebody picked you up and said, there, and stroked your shoulder and said, there, you'll be okay. It feels nice, isn't it? It's comforting.
Yeah. It's like having a hug.
It is like having a hug, exactly that. And if you're feeling a bit nervous, what do? We wring our hands, don't we? A lot of people do that. Mm. And if we're feeling really, really out of sorts, it's kind of, oh, God.
Yes.
Now, all of those motions generate something called a lot higher levels of what we call a delta wave. And we have all sorts of different waves in the brain. Delta waves aren't normally present during the day. They're normally in deep sleep, where we're basically replenishing from the day. We're recovering, we're rebuilding. It's not even when we're dreaming. It's non-REM sleep, so it's deeper than that. And we don't normally experience it during the day. So often when I've been working with somebody, whether it's online or in person, I'll say to them, "How you doing?" I'll go, "Oh, a bit sleepy." And that's quite normal, because your brain or your body thinks that you've been to sleep, because you're generating these delta waves, which you normally generate in deep sleep. It's like, "Oh, I feel as though I've been asleep." That wears off. Pardon?
Wow, it's just absolutely fascinating.
And that's where the magic happens, because again, don't have time to go into the way it works in any detail. But the delta wave is a much slower wave than the things that we would normally have on our plate normally during the day. So something like a gamma wave, which is very active, and if you see a brain pattern, it'll be jumping up and down like this. Delta waves are long and go up and down like this. It's a very different brain frequency, and that's the electro part of the electrochemical change. And because you've got the change in the
is that a calming effect?
it is very calming. And what I would recommend to anybody listening now is, if you ever feel a little bit upset, anxious about anything at all, just try a little bit of this. Distract yourself ideally as well.
For those listening, he's stroking his arms.
Very good. But if you wouldn't mind humouring me, Karen, just have a stroke of your arms and shoulders if you can. And it just feels nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the same applies if you do this, just on your face like that.
Yeah.
And the hands as well. Now, those different parts of the body, the palms, it generates 5 times the resting rate of delta waves. So normally what we would experience when we're awake, you get about 5 times boost of that when you do this. And that's all you need. When you do the arms, it's more like something like 14 times. And the face can be up to 60 times, 60. So I never start with the face with anybody, because I've seen people actually physically jolt because of the sort of electrical charge. That's my interpretation anyway. So it's kind of
sorry.
it's that's right. So it's electrical energy, but then the electrical energy generates various neurotransmitters, so chemicals in the body, and that does the rest of the work. But they only come if you do this havening touch. So it's I absolutely adore it, because anything that is emotion related, it'll work on. Now, that means I've gone working with people who have commonly called PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. I prefer to call it post-traumatic stress injury, because people can be repaired. So I work with a few veterans, for example, but I've worked with one particular lady I worked with last year. She'd gone through a really horrible divorce, and through discussion it turned out she'd had a very narcissistic husband and all sorts of horrible stuff going on in the marriage. And she was actually suffering from PTSD as well, but a slightly different form, and or slightly different cause anyway. So it can work on deep stress and trauma like that. Or if you're just not feeling brilliant, just distract yourself, and you can chant things to yourself, stroke, and just chill a little bit. And I run sessions on a Sunday, which, if people know me and all they have to do is connect with me, it's free. So you can come along, learn a bit more about the background of havening, so the science, where it came from, and then get to apply it. And I'll take you through actually how to do it. And I can do a bit now if you like, just to demonstrate how it works.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Let's give it a go.
All right. Well,
I'm up for it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you know how to do the havening touch now. And what I like to think of, and please, no deep trauma here, and I'm not suggesting you've got lots of deep trauma to work on, but I wouldn't know. So I'm just going to ask you, work on, and you don't have to tell me anything about it. That's another beautiful thing about havening. You don't have to tell me anything about it.
Right.
Because it's a electrochemical change, I don't need to know.
So it's not a talking therapy.
Well, it can be.
But it is bringing up, see, this is what I do see with a lot of different things. Some are sort of almost avoiding the feeling because they don't want to go there. But actually, what you're saying is you need to face it. Is that what you're saying? You need to, for a moment, sit in the feeling of it.
Yes,
to
that's
create
important.
Change.
That's
Not
important. But
saying
you don't
it's
have.
wrong, but just you need that feeling,
Mhm.
and it's okay. It's a safe environment, I suppose, with you to do it.
Yeah, and that's why I don't.
Point.
Yeah, that's why I don't want people to go into deep trauma on a public forum like this.
No, sure.
If it was a private one-to-one, then yes, we would. But again, there's no obligation to tell anybody about the detail. And I'll give you another example. I worked with a lady last year during lockdown, and she came to me through a recommendation, and she said, "I've got two things to work on." And she said, "One I'm going to tell you about, and one I'm not." I said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." So one, she told me the detail, and that was fine. And the other one, she said, I just can't tell you about the other one." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." So all I did was I asked her to think about it. So with yourself, Karen, again, don't feel as though you need to tell me anything about it, but just think of something that bothers you at the moment, okay? And it could be anything, but low-level anxiety, please. Nothing too deeply traumatic at all. But it could be, you're worried about a relative who's not been very well. It could be something at work. It could be something outside of work. It could be that you're a brilliant netball player and you've got a championship match coming up. It could be you're giving a presentation. It could be anything. Just something that you feel a little bit uncomfortable about. So you're thinking about that now. Okay, it might be easier if you just shut your eyes for a moment. I'm just going to let you sit in that, and I use the word marinate. Just marinate in that uncomfortable feeling just for half a minute, and so I'll just time that and make sure that you don't do it for too long. And all I want you to do is think about if it was an event in the past that you're still uncomfortable about. Just think about who was there, what was happening. If it's something in the future, again, think the same, and how it affects you in your body. So, is it tightness in the chest? Is it you're feeling a bit hot? If you're feeling uncomfortable somewhere, and just kind of feel that feeling. It won't last so much longer. So, if I was to ask you, Karen, on a scale of 0 to 10, and 10 being really horrendous, really difficult to even think about, what would be the feeling? 10 being really awful and 0 being doesn't mean anything to me.
A 5.
About a 5. Okay. All right. Then clear your mind. And where were you last weekend?
I've got to think. What was I doing? Oh, yes, I know. I was in Greenwich having a lovely birthday meal with a friend.
Fantastic. Oh, with your birthday?
No, not my birthday.
Oh, okay. All right. And if I can ask you, put one hand on one shoulder and one hand on the other shoulder, and just keep on stroking your arms like this. I'll stop so we don't have excess noise on the microphone. But if you carry on, please, and just that sort of speed, not too fast, just nice and leisurely, just nice and comfortable. And where's your favourite place in the world?
Oh, Ibiza.
Ibiza, right. Keep on stroking your arms for me.
Oh.
And I want you to imagine that you are in Ibiza. Is this because I know you like your music?
Yes, I do like my music.
And you like dancing, I presume?
Oh, I do like my dancing.
Okay. So what's the best place to be in Ibiza? Where do you have the most fun?
Oh, the most fun at a beach party, I would say.
Right. I want you to take yourself back. If you need to close your eyes and take yourself there, that's fine too. But I want you to imagine that you're at the beach party and you are having the time of your life. You are having an absolute ball. And just tell me what's happening around you.
Yes, just lots of friends around, smiley faces, hands in the air, people just enjoying the moment.
Fantastic. And are you on a beach?
Yeah.
Are you barefoot?
Beach bar. Oh, yeah, barefoot.
Right. Well, I want you to imagine that you're walking along that beach and you can feel the grains of sand beneath your feet. It's a lovely warm day. The sun is out. There's a gentle wind blowing and you can see the sea and you can hear a little bit the lapping of the waves and lots of very smiley, happy people all around you. And it's just a lovely, lovely day. So keep on walking. Every step that you take, every single movement, you're feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit more relaxed. Just really enjoying yourself. You've got a great big grin on your face, and you just feel supremely relaxed and comfortable and happy and peaceful. And you just keep on walking. And as you walk along, that feeling of comfort and being safe and happy and exhilarated even just starts increasing bit by bit all the time. Each further step that you take, it just keeps on growing, and you're feeling absolutely wonderful. So keep on walking down that beach. Just enjoy taking the sights in. What else can you see as you walk along the beach?
People in the distance on sun lounges, the sun just about to set in the sea.
Lovely. Brilliant. Keep on looking around you. Keep on walking. Just enjoying that lovely, comforting feeling as you walk along. Just sun on your face, on your back, however it's appearing to you. And just feel that warmth and contentment inside as you walk along. You're feeling really, really good. Ready to face anything. Ready to party. So let's do a little pause there. So how are you feeling?
Great. Get me on a plane.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I ask you to go back to that thing you first thought about, you gave me a score out of 10, you gave me a 5. If you go back to that now, has that number changed at all, or is it still a 5?
Can't find it.
There we go.
Can't even find it. Yeah.
So, and that's
interesting.
how Hayley
Wow.
works. I've got a book here which I've only just recently bought. Actually, it's been out a few years, but it's called 15 Minutes to Freedom. It's by a fellow trainer called Harry Pickens, and Harry's also a jazz musician. And he's a very talented guy. But he wrote that book, and it's basically interviews with Having practitioners and trainers and the originators, so the two Dr. Rudens.
Right.
And it takes you through all of the applications, and there's no coincidence that it's 15 minutes to freedom, because as I mentioned earlier, well, it depends. It can be that quick.
Yeah, I suppose mine was only a 5. It wasn't anything really traumatic.
No, exactly. And also, I was talking about the layers of an onion before. If somebody has had a horrible traumatic experience, perhaps when they're young, then that predisposes them perhaps to other trauma, and you build up the layers of the onion, and you might have to peel quite a few layers away. So in that case, it's probably.
What if they don't know? What if then? Because a lot of things that I've noticed with a lot of people is that it could be something that they're completely not aware of.
You're absolutely right.
Automatic response to something that they've consciously forgotten about or buried. So how would you get to those layers?
That's a really good question, and fortunately, havening does have a way of doing that. And we do something called transpirational havening. So if people know the event that caused the issue in the first place, we always try and get them back to that, because that's the easiest one to clear. So like the lady I talked about with the sexual assault 38 years previously, that was one very specific event, and that was quite easy to clear. But if you don't know where it came from, or maybe there are lots of other things built on the original traumatic experience, then we might use something called transpirational havening. And that way we still use the havening touch, and we get you to feel the feeling. But we get people to chant words out that just express how they feel. So if they're feeling angry, then we get them to say angry whilst they're doing the havening touch. And it's really strange how the word changes as you go through. And again, the skill of a facilitator or a practitioner is that they will help you work your way through that, and they will recognize changes. So we see changes in skin tone. We see relaxation of muscles, or the tightening of muscles. If it's going off into they found another traumatic event, and sometimes that happens. Suddenly it unblocks a memory, and you think, "Oh God, I didn't even know that was there." And you sort of go. You need to go down another route.
Wow. I mean, does
So
it really then matter what the memory, or is it more important the feeling?
the feeling is more important, actually.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter if you haven't got all of the memory, because you can work on the feeling. But if you have the memory, if you have detail, then that will certainly help. But it's not essential. And
So I
I've worked.
suppose you switched completely from going from I mean, that's quite interesting to me, what you were doing originally,
Oh yeah,
almost initiating a cortisol response to help people deal with it. It's
yeah.
not so far off. It's just applied differently, isn't it? Really, because you are still. It's a bit calmer. It's a bit
Well,
less.
yeah, it's certainly calmer.
It's a bit less aggressive
Yes.
to get them to just for 30 seconds to just hold that emotion, whereas before you were really trying to obviously,
Yeah.
trigger.
We don't traumatize people. That's why the coach is there, to make sure we don't. But in that type of training, but the all we're doing, both of them work on the amygdala. So the amygdala is the emotional center of the brain. It's about that size, about the size of an almond. We've got two of them sort of up around here, just above the ears, and that is the crux of the emotional center of the brain, and that's what we're working on. So that's where all this encoding happens, and where the brain essentially finds out, well, is this a threat to me? Do I need to respond straight away before you've even engaged your cortex?
Right.
So it's slightly different.
I mean, do you feel that things have changed over the last few years? As in, I mean, obviously you said you deal with children as well, or you dealt with younger people. Do you think, for instance, going back to what you were originally doing, that resilience is really something that's missing with a lot of young people, or the fact that people are being triggered way too easily and they don't have that ability to stay calm in a situation? Do you think things have changed over the last few years?
Yes, I do. If you'd asked me that, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I'd have said I'm not sure it's any different from before. But with the advent of these things, smartphones, and there's a whole new, I mean, generations have grown up now only knowing that. And one generation at least. And we've now got a situation where people get instant this, instant that. And I think that we've become an environment now that expects, certainly in a high wealth environment that we live in the UK, for example, compared to most places in the world, we can afford these technologies, and they've become increasingly cheap around the rest of the world as well. And people do expect instantaneous results
now, instant.
Yeah, and I think there's been a real change, and I don't think it's a good one, from that perspective anyway. There's great things you can do with all these mobile devices and all the technology, but this isn't one of the good end results of it. I think it's made people more impatient. It's made people more aggressive indirectly, and so therefore, and loads of other things besides, which we could spend lots of time talking about. But it's I think there has been a fundamental shift, and I'm not sure about resilience. I think it depends what you see on the phone, and your personal makeup. It depends where your starting point. And again, as a practitioner, you learn all about the landscape of the brain and where people are, and where some people will see the same thing, and one will be traumatized, and one won't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
but with and definitely also with what's gone on in the last. God, it's coming up 2 years. It's coming up 2 years. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Mental health has definitely been on the rise. Some people have flourished, obviously, and other people have really, really struggled.
Yeah.
So even with things like that, even if people say we're struggling out there due to what's going on that is out of their control, would this havening technique help them?
Yes, because people can get onto a treadmill really where it never seems to stop, and if they're out of control, having can take you to a place where you just, let's just take a breath, let's just calm down a moment, allow myself to think, because we can't, if we're adrenalized, if we are frightened, then we don't think too well, because we're not thinking with our prefrontal cortex, we're thinking with the amygdala, which is there to protect us. It's our fight or flight response, which most people have heard of, or our freeze response, which often kicks in, especially on our courses where they go, oh.
Yeah. Well, like you say, everyone reacts differently, and you don't know whether you would freeze in that instant, react, or run.
Yeah. And in that instance, they don't know what we're going to say to them either. And so some people are cool as cucumbers, but then we look for a trigger for them, and we get there eventually. Sometimes it's harder than others, but we do say some horrible things, I'm afraid, on that course. But I won't repeat those now for obvious reasons.
But have you now completely switched over to just the havening, or do you still do it?
No. The thing is, of course, with the world we've been in the last couple of years now with COVID, I was running quite a successful face-to-face training business up until March last year. It just all dried up at that time. So I thought, well, what can I do? And havening was one of the things I could do, which you can do online. It's very effective online. And so I was helping people. People I've worked with. There's a chap in the States who suddenly got claustrophobic because he'd been in a car accident. He said, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do my best." And so helped him, and that was, I think we did that on Skype. But whether it's Zoom or WhatsApp or FaceTime, whatever your poison is, we
that's one of the good things, isn't it? That's the one good thing that has come out of it in this time. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I would have survived. Forget the actual virus. I don't think I would have survived the aftermath of it all without the technology that is around today. I mean, thank goodness for Zoom and this StreamYard and all these ways. You don't have to be in person.
No.
And I can imagine that wouldn't make any difference for you, would it? To really
not with havening, no. But the trouble is, if I was to do the dark glasses bit over this, then we don't want to traumatize people.
No,
we can't have somebody.
Actually.
Yeah, that's not the purpose. Oh. We're not looking to traumatize people. We're trying to take away the trauma, and so that's a non-starter really. And yes, we could do a bit of self-defense, but frankly, I want to give real confidence and real ability. And if we're not there, not able to help people through that. That experiential training is the best type of way of proving it. Yes, you can learn certain things, but there's no substitute to actually doing it.
So that's slightly different. So with the havening technique, I mean, you say is it literally, you say it's instantaneous, but does that mean you're literally just doing one session with a client and then that's it? Boom, they're done?
No, it really depends. Everybody's different, and I mean, the most I've ever done with one client is 6 sessions. But a lot of them are just one, because they've said, I've got this problem, and they're very specific, and it's often based on an event. And if you can go back to the event, they are relatively easy to clear. And I normally offer it like an hour appointment. And sometimes we're twiddling our thumbs at 40 minutes. Anything else we can work on?
Wow.
Oh, okay. Let me have a think. So yeah, I can't guarantee that because everybody's different and situations are different. But it's often that way. It's rare that I do 3 or 4 sessions. I do sometimes, but the most, as I say, is 6. And
incredible, absolutely incredible.
And that's
but you say it's permanent. I mean, so what would be the difference? Say, for instance, I mean, so part of that I can imagine, I don't know, you mentioned Paul McKenna earlier, so hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is a different link because there's no real physical connection there because there's no touching of stuff. It's purely taking them in and going into their subconscious. But even that wouldn't necessarily be permanent.
Well, I can't really speak for hypnotherapy because that's not my expertise. But if I compare it to something like I've just got a brain freeze. Chinese medicine, or traditionally Chinese medicine, that my mum used to have. And I'm just struggling to think of the name. What on earth is the name?
Not acupuncture.
Yeah, acupuncture. That's exactly it. Yeah. I just had a brain freeze, couldn't think of the word, but thank you for that. My mum used to have acupuncture for arthritis, and she would have great relief from it, but then it would come back. I'm not sure how often it came back, but every so often she would go to a local chap who would put needles into her skin, and she found it really, really beneficial. But it would come back.
Mm-hmm.
So what the difference between that and havening is that havening, once you've got to the root of what something is, once you've depotentiated the amygdala, which is basically, in very crude terms, clearing it out, if you like, clearing out the bad stuff, then it doesn't come back. It's
done.
It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I come from a healing, physical. I was a sports therapist, so from the acupuncture side, I can understand that it would come back because if it was, I don't know, posture related, and at ease, but of course the next week you do the same things that was causing, it's going to come back because you're repeating the pattern that's causing the problem.
Yes.
But then what you're saying is, unless you are going to go out and have exactly the same traumatic experience as the one that caused it, once you've corrected it, it's corrected.
Yes. Yeah. So it's.
No, I can see that.
I just talk about it being, you don't have to tell people about it. It's usually very quick. No guarantees. If something's very complex, then it'll take longer. But it's usually very quick. It is instantaneous, the change, and people wake up the next day. I mean, they have the change straight away, but it feels a bit fuzzy at the time, often. But people wake up the next day and they're like, "I feel different this morning." And Tony, my instructor, he's got this lovely expression which I've borrowed from him, which is the filing cabinets adjust themselves overnight in your head
when you've rested.
So something that was a really big issue, or really, holding you back doing something because of guilt or emotion of some kind, or fear about consequences, anything to do with that, is just gone. And so you think about it differently and you approach things differently. So it's such a lovely thing to be able to give someone.
Powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Powerful. Yeah. I mean, I suppose, at the end of the day, that's all as much as sometimes we would love to control our subconscious and just go, stop doing that. Stop.
Yeah,
but
good luck.
It's only doing it to protect us, because that's all it knows is the past experience. I suppose once you've done that, it's almost like your subconscious has had that realisation, like, okay, fine, it's safe now. I'm not whatever, I don't know, if you had a traumatic experience at 9. I'm not 9 anymore, I'm 50 now. Now, come on.
Yeah.
It's not the same situation. I do not need to do this, and this.
Yeah. And by the way, you're still left with some of the things that you were born with, which are natural fears that are there again to protect us. So they don't go away. So the fear of open spaces, for example, that we're born with, the fear of heights, to a certain extent, where you shouldn't drop off a ledge, because you're going to hurt yourself.
Possibly a good fear.
Yes.
Not bad.
It's there to protect us.
Depends, doesn't it?
Yeah. Loud noises. Bang. Oh, what was that? We know these aren't necessarily good for us. In heavily enclosed spaces, you don't want to get trapped in, as cavemen and women, we don't want to get trapped in the cave, because the animals can come in and eat us, or something like that. So all these fears that we're born with, they don't disappear. No. So you just, you lose the over-exaggeration or complications that have gathered through your own experiences, or what you might have seen. So it's, you can get trauma firsthand by experiencing it yourself. You can get trauma secondhand by watching someone
Right.
have a horrible experience.
Yeah, sure.
And some people are really susceptible, who are in not a good way. Just hearing about it can be traumatized. They hear about something and they're very empathetic, and they just, if they're in a very difficult place themselves, they can be traumatized from that even.
Yeah, sure. Yes, anything can be a trigger these days. But that is what I wanted to sort of bring back to the sort of resilience, because it does feel like, I suppose, because of social media, I say this purely because my 17-year-old daughter will sort of share with me things that are on TikTok or whatever, and you just think, oh, come on, what is wrong with this generation? Like, everything's a trigger, and you can't do that because that's gonna. Everybody's so easily offended these days. I just think, like, my era, I don't think we got offended really by much, to be fair. Whereas, do you think it's because of this? It's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's like,
I think, I think the phones and this instant society have got a lot to answer for. It's not all down to the phones, I don't believe, but
it can't be.
Yeah, I think no, and I think there's been all sorts of isms that have been out, and they've just been around for far too long. But people can hide behind these things when, bullying, when taking some kind of discriminatory action, whether that's about somebody's race or their look or their colour or their religion or their gender or how they identify sexually, whatever it is. It's that we're very aware of different things like that nowadays, and it's a very different world. We've got a much more open society, and so people can kind of ally themselves to a certain identity, and that's fine. But they might also be more easily offended if people don't give the respect to that new identity.
It's like, everybody relax. So everybody needs take a deep breath. Anything that's bothering them, rather than push it, because I suppose we things like you've got to have a positive mental attitude, or people feel that they've got to, this perception, we've got to be positive and happy and upbeat all the time. But actually, if we're forcing the natural emotion away, we could actually be making it worse.
Well, I think there's a nice expression I heard about, you light and shade. You can't appreciate the light until you've seen a bit of the shade. And,
there you go. Absolutely.
That's just, unfortunately.
And that's what everything is, isn't it? So it's comparison, isn't it? You can't have anything.
Yeah.
Anything's just, it's nothing on its own until you compare it to something else. So if anybody would like to give this a go, you said that you do a Sunday session. You can try it out. How would people find you?
Oh, that's very kind, Karen. Probably the best thing to do is put me into Google. No, don't put me into Google, but put my name into Google. I would like to be put into Google.
No.
So if you put Mark Wingfield and put either Havening is probably the best thing. I do have my previous and still existing work. We've done a little bit since things have opened up, but not a huge amount yet on the intimidation stuff. That's maxconflictmanagement.com, and you can always see on there my Eventbrite sessions are always on there. I think that's under the contact us bit somewhere. But you can look me up on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and
do you have a website?
Well, that's the website, which is Max, MAX, and then conflictmanagement.com. So it's all one word. There is a new one, which is coming out shortly. I can't promise when it's going to be live, but it's going to be called Empowering. That's M and then powering .xyz, but it's not live yet. That'll be.
That's the first, empowering.xyz. Oh, I haven't heard of one of them.
Yeah, I saw that domain and I thought, It's kind of, I'm into empowering anything really. So that kind of works for me.
X, Y, Z. Cool. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So if anybody's listening on the radio, you can always find it if you go to the podcast, KarenRobertsCoaching.com/podcast. All Mark's details, any links to him and his bio, you will be able to find in there. What are absolutely fascinating subjects. So are you saying that really you were sort of guided into this because of lockdown? Was it this that you fitted in? Oh, okay.
I kind of, my focus has changed because of lockdown. I took the opportunity. I've been approached a couple of times. I've helped out with the first French training and the first online German training of Havening, because I speak a couple of languages. And but I hadn't focused on Havening training because I had lots of other things to do. But I love Havening, and in lockdown, it kind of gave me an opportunity to refocus and to keep my head above water, basically. And now I train practitioners, so people can dip their toe in the water, come along and experience it. They can book me, obviously, if they need some help, or if somebody's out there who's got a lot of tools under their belt, they want to find out more about Havening, they're interested in learning about how to become a practitioner, then get in contact, and I'll be very happy to take them through what the certification process is, and I would mentor people through that, make sure that they're comfortable with that. There's a science exam, which you have to get 100% for.
Oh, science. Was that chemistry? I don't think I was very good at chemistry.
Well, neither was I. But you go through it enough and have it explained.
You didn't put it to something that you were passionate about, so now there's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've had a very good teacher. When I did chemistry, my chemistry teacher was rubbish. So I don't blame him completely, but
you didn't connect.
It helps when you have a good trainer.
Yeah, when you connect with somebody, and there's more of a reason to learn the science because it's connected to this, and that's
indeed.
That's how we learn, isn't it? When there's no sort of real, or you're not putting it to something, it's just blur.
You've got some motivation. Absolutely. Yeah, you really want to learn. You don't just have to learn. It's something that
it's not being forced upon you, and it doesn't make any sense because you're not connecting it to everyday life. No. Now you're connecting it to something specific, so you're more likely to even want to learn it, aren't you?
Yeah. So and that's what we get on courses. We get people who are intrigued. They can be skeptical. They can be as skeptical as they like. But they're intrigued. We get a lot of people who've done EMDR, for example, eye movement desensitization. What's the R? Reprocessing, that's it. That's the R. We get people who've done EFT, TFT, we get NLP.
So it could be an add-on for any coaches out there who are doing the therapy, NLP, anything like that. This is another tool for the toolbox, isn't it? Because
it does.
I suppose horses for courses. Some people respond to one thing and others will respond to something else.
Yeah, it sits alongside all of those that I've mentioned and lots more that I haven't mentioned. It stands in its own right, but it also works. If you put the Havening touch with a lot of other things, then it gives it sort of rocket boosters. And it's really good in combination with other things. I've met a lot of people who are NLP masters, some German colleagues, they picked up they do EMDR, which is used in Germany as well as approved under the NHS in the UK, and they said it's so much easier with Havening. I'm just going to do Havening now. So not always, and I don't claim to be an expert in the EMDR either, but
I've always thought that is the issue, is people, we don't have a holistic enough approach to anything. If we could, there's so many different modalities and different therapies, and rather than this person saying my way is the right way and this person, if the combination, the more tools you've got in your toolbox,
indeed,
the more you can help your client, right?
Yes. Another example is I've got two daughters. My eldest daughter had a dog phobia years And we got a lady in who was a specialist in EFT, but we'd heard that it might help. And unfortunately, it didn't help my daughter at all. It just made no difference whatsoever. But I do know that EFT has worked, wonderfully in other applications. And so,
horses for
it's
courses.
horses for courses.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark.
Pleasure.
That's
Thank
been
you,
a
Karen.
whole learning curve for me too. So, yeah, thank you for your time. And so to the listeners, I will be back next week with a coffee with Karen. Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Thanks very much indeed, Karen.
Welcome to the Coffee with Karen podcast, a weekly chat show discussing everything from holistic health to current affairs from a mental, physical, and spiritual perspective. Get your weekly cup of positivity with a sprinkling of woo-woo.